Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. For today I rounded up some of the most gruesome and upsetting murders that you may have never heard of. Just a warning that these accounts can be upsetting to some and describe graphic details of real-life cases. Number 1. Papin sisters. French sisters Lee and Christine Papin worked as live-in servants for the Lancelin family in France in 1926. Although it was reported that they acted quite up, never talking to anyone but themselves and showing little interest in anything besides each other, according to historic mysteries. They did their work quickly and lived with the family for almost 7 years. Then, one night in February 1933, Mr. Lancelin, who had been waiting for his wife at a friend's house, came home to find her and their adult daughter dead on the floor in a pool of blood. Their eyes had been gouged out and faces smashed in. The Papin sisters were locked in their room, and after getting a locksmith to open the door, the police said they found the sisters lying on the bed together with the bloody hammer nearby, according to the Vintage News. The Papin sisters immediately confessed to the crimes. While in prison, Christine became very distressed from being away from her sister and was eventually granted permission to see Lee. Reports said that the sisters seemed to be unnaturally close to each other, with some suggesting a sexual relationship, though doctors who examined the Papin sisters denied evidence of that. A few months later, Christine suffered a mental breakdown and tried to gouge out her own eyes. After their trial, Christine was sentenced to life in prison for being the mastermind behind the murders, while Lee was eventually released from prison in 1943 and managed to get a job at a French hotel under a new identity. It is believed that she died in 1982, but that has never been confirmed. Number 2. Dennis Nilsen. Dennis Nilsen terrorized London in the late 70s and early 80s, killing 15 men over a 5-year period. Nilsen would pick up young men at bars and take them back to his home. There, he'd strangle or drown them. Once dead, he'd bake and dress the bodies, according to the International Business Times. He admitted to police that he kept the bodies for extended periods of time before disposing of them so that he could have sex with them and talk to them. He passed away in 2018 aged 72, after serving 34 years in prison. Number 3. Katherine Knight. Katherine Knight, an Australian woman, stabbed her partner, John Price, to death 37 times in 2000. Knight then skinned him, decapitated his head, and cooked up parts of his body. She set her dining room table for two and served the cooked meat with baked potatoes and side vegetables. She placed handwritten notes next to each table setting with the names of Price's children on them. She was attempting to serve them their father for dinner. When police finally arrived at the house, they found Knight in a comatose state with pills spilled out on the floor. They also found Price's head boiling in a pot of soup on the stove. Knight was the first woman to be sentenced to life imprisonment without parole. She is currently serving her sentence in Silverwater Correctional Complex in New South Wales, Australia. Number 4. Issei Sagawa. The famous Japanese cannibal is notorious in his country. He grew up in a wealthy family but always had the urge for human flesh. At 23, Sagawa was arrested for attempted rape, according to Culture Crossfire. He entered the apartment of a tall German woman living in Tokyo and attacked her. Police didn't realize he was actually attempting to eat her, even though he bit off a piece of her flesh. Sagawa, who was 5 feet tall, later told Vice he was obsessed with taller Western women. At 32, Sagawa went to study literature in France, even receiving his PhD. It was there that he befriended a classmate, a 25-year-old Dutch woman named Renée Hartevelt. The friendship proved deadly for Hartevelt as one night in 1981, Sagawa invited her over under the guise of working on a poetry assignment but ended up shooting her in the neck and eating various parts of her body over a 2-day span. He attempted to dump the leftovers of her body in a lake nearby but was caught in the act. He was held in police custody for 2 years before being deemed legally insane and deported back to Japan. Once in Japan, he was declared sane by psychologists and signed himself out of the mental institution where he was being held. He currently lives as a free man in Japan. In 2013, Sagawa was hospitalized from a cerebral infarction, which permanently damaged his nervous system, and since being released has been under the full-time care of his brother. Number 5. The Hi-Fi Murders. The Hi-Fi Murders in 1974 still shock today. 3 men, Dale Selby, William Andrews, and Keith Roberts entered the Hi-Fi shop in Upton just before closing time. They then held store workers 20-year-old Stanley Walker and 18-year-old Michelle Ansley hostage in the basement before robbing the store. Later, 16-year-old Brian Naismith entered the store as he was running errands and was also taken hostage. Both Brian's mother, Carol Peterson Naismith, and Stanley's father, Owen Walker, arrived at the store to look for their children where they suffered the same fate. What happened next is unimaginable and involved the hostages being forced to drink a corrosive liquid that caused their lips, tongues and throats to burn and the flesh to peel away from their skin. The hours of torture also included the use of a ballpoint pen as a weapon, and 3 of the hostages were shot dead. The 2 surviving victims, Owen Walker and Brian Naismith, sustained permanent life-changing injuries. The twisted killers were executed via lethal injection, all except for Keith Roberts, who was charged with aggravated robbery and sentenced to life imprisonment. Gary Kinder explores the hi-fi murders in his 1982 book, Victim, which largely focuses on the Naismith family in the wake of the crime. It was a standout of the genre for this very reason, earning praise from Newsweek as Truman Capote's In Cold Blood turned inside out, and became a pivotal part of the FBI training program at Quantico. But while much of the book is concerned with exploring the emotional aftermath, it also recounts the crime in unflinching, sometimes hard-to-stomach detail. Read on for an excerpt in which Carol Naismith first enters the scene and the killers prepare to force-feed their victims Drano. We reached the end of today's video. If you liked it, press like. Also make sure to subscribe and turn bell icon to see more videos like this.